Scores of police officers gathered in Queens, New York for the funeral of fallen policeman Rafael Ramos. 1 week ago, a gunman murdered Ramos and his partner in their squad car. The execution-style killings were payback for police killings of unarmed black men. The random slayings of policemen shocked the nation and triggered controversy. New York City's Mayor Bill de Blasio is at the center of the fallout. Many officers are angry with him for supposedly failing to support them in the national wave of protests against police brutality. Scores of officers turned their backs on de Blasio when he spoke at Officer Ramos' funeral. Police Commissioner William Bratton said that their behavior was very inappropriate, but he noted that morale in the department is indeed low. Meanwhile, the funeral for Ramos' partner, Officer Wenjian Liu, awaits the arrival of relatives from China. Well, New York City Councilmember Jumaane Williams represents several Brooklyn neighborhoods. He's also co-chair of the Gun Violence Task Force. Welcome to Arise America, and it's good to see you once again after a long time. You know, I've got to ask about this. There's been so much talk about the mayor being the tempest in the teapot, as it were. And of course, we heard the PBA president here of the union that represents patrolmen here in New York saying that he had blood on his hands. He kind of retracted from that. I've got to ask, where do we go from here in terms of healing, because there seems to be so much tension in the city over this shooting and what's going on now and how police officers are treated by the community and vice versa?
Well, we have to remember the tensions were there before this horrific act by a lone, mentally disranged human being. It was tragic. I think what we need to do is be able to have this conversation civilly. Unfortunately, there are some that don't want to have the conversation at all and have always not wanted to have the conversation. Anytime conversations come up about better policing, and not just better policing, resources that are given to certain communities, there's a kind of blowback and a pushback. And if we look at this, within the past even 3 or 4 years, many of us have tried to engage a civil discussion. They have not engaged, and they've made it adversarial every single time. Even we passed some bills in the city council about 2 years ago, last year, against an override of the mayor. So they lost in the city council. Then they lost in the federal courts, and they also lost during the elections. So they're taking this tragedy as the last gasp, instead of saying, okay, let's come to the table. What they have been doing wasn't working because the mass hysteria is never backed by fact because it doesn't happen. Well,
I'm glad that you mentioned that mass hysteria right now. What we've seen right now, what a lot of people don't know, that Ed Mullins is reaching out, the Sergeant Benevolence Association is reaching out now to black clergy, as well as, believe it or not, Pat Lynch. I understand he's trying to make some overtures now to kind of mend the wounds here. But do you think perhaps that the media plays a vital role in this and basically not presenting the facts as they exist? In other words, even Al Sharpton, whether you agree with him or not, he has repeatedly said he is not anti-cop, he is anti-police brutality, but you never see that narrative out there in any full force in the media.
I think everybody has culpability, including the media, but of course we use them when we want them to get a message out, so we have to be careful how we talk about it. But of course, what sells is the friction, and what sells is the adversarial behavior. What doesn't sell is Al Sharpton saying, we admonish what is going on here. We have never been anti-police, and have actually done everything to try to make sure that message goes out. But that's not the message that plays up. And so what I'm hoping is that all sides who have a part to play can push the civility of the conversation that has to happen. It's been going on across the country as we speak, and it rears its head every so often, and we try to pretend that everything's okay, and it gets latent, and then it bubbles up.
Lastly, the most prolific, I think, speech at the funeral of Ramos was William Bratton, when he talked about this possibility of healing, so on and so forth. But yet and still we have these splinter groups coming here, protesters outside of the National Action Network. And folks, even after all sides said, hey, look, let's hold off on any protests now until after these 2 officers are buried. Do you think that these protesters, who do indeed have the right to protest, are doing the wrong thing when everybody's telling them not to do so and just hold off for a while?
Well, let's not just say the protesters, because the police haven't stopped either. They keep turning their backs. They keep pushing this rhetoric. My concern is that we always seem to be focusing on the type of protest that's going on instead of the issues that are causing the protest to begin with. So I, for one, said I think there should be a day or 2, but it's up to the protesters to decide whether that was good for their strategy or not. So we have to know that these people are angry, and so these officers that lost their life, we need to mourn. Their families should be taken care of. But there are other families who are going through this holiday season without loved ones as well. Eric Gardner, Akai Gurley, John Crawford, Mike Brown, and the list goes on, and we have to remember that as well.
Okay, look, I have a lot more I want to talk to you about, Councilman, but anyway, thank you for joining us. It's good to see you here.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And of course, you're watching Arise, America.